have now the great pleasure to introduce our next guest, Mark Wallinger. Mark Wallinger studied in London, the Chelsea School of Art and at Goldsmith College, and ever since the mid-80s, one of his primary concerns has been to establish a valid critical approach to the politics of representation and the representation of politics. As Molly Nesbitt says, he addresses a lot of this urgent question of a social contract of art and has often explored issues of the responsibilities of individuals and those of society. He represented Britain at the 49th Venice Biennale in 2001 and won the Turner Prize in 2007. In 2007, he also did the groundbreaking piece State Britain, a recreation at Tate Britain of Brian Hawes' anti-war protest outside the Houses of Parliament. A very warm welcome to Mark Wallinger.
Bruce Nauman was born the day before Pearl Harbor was attacked. Reports that say something hasn't happened are always interesting to me because, as we know, there are known knowns, there are things we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know, but there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know. The day after Bruce Nauman was born, Pearl Harbor was attacked. Some years ago, I was invited by an old friend from college to give a talk about my work at Hull School of Art. He was relatively new to teaching, and I was a reluctant speaker. He was nervous for me, and the feeling was contagious. The lecture theatre had a prodigious rake and a formal lectern. This was to be my first experience of stage fright. I would try to begin a sentence, personal pronoun followed by verb, followed by what? Each word became disconnected from myself and any ordering logic. It seemed to land on the floor and stare back at me like those words that grow crazy if you think about them too much. It seemed to be too densely packed to own to anything but itself. I remember the students were agog. A panic attack is a meeting with the absolute. The here and now are catastrophically present, suffocating any attempts at reflection with existential dread. I recognize this aphasia as a quintessential Naumanesque experience. Do something or I'll die. I can't do anything. Speak and die. Speak and live. Fail and die. Fail and live. Run from fear. Fun from rear. There is a German term, earworm, which defines those insidious tunes, riffs, jingles, catchphrases that work their way into one's consciousness. They come unbeckoned. Please pay attention, please. Make me, think me, repeat and repeat. No, 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 no. I'm not into this detail stuff, I'm more concepty. That is Donald Rumsfeld again. Humpty Dumpty pleading to be liberated from the constraints of his story, from responsibility. What if there is no moral to the tale? When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. The question is, said Alice Liddell, our embedded correspondent, whether you can make words mean so many different things. The question is, said Humpty Dumpty, which is to be the master, that's all. My word is my bond, I give you my word. In the beginning was the pun. Words become intransigent or under pressure of great conflicts, untrustworthy, evasive, treacherous, like photographs. Time and space cannot be faked. Weight, gravity, stillness, movement, the laws of motion, an equal and opposite force. Newton, who gave us gravity but believed in alchemy. The true artist helps the world by revealing mystic truths. Einstein is asleep. He's dreaming now, said Gilbert. And what do you think he's dreaming about? Alice said, nobody can guess that. Why, about you, Gilbert exclaimed, clapping his hands triumphantly. And if he left off dreaming about you, where do you suppose you'd be? Where I am now, of course, said Alice. Not you, Gilbert retorted contemptuously. You'd be nowhere. Why, you're only a sort of thing in his dream. If he was to wake, added George, you'd go out bang, just like a candle. In religious ceremony, the repetitions, no matter what religion, are ruled by, the loops around the sun, even before we know we are aboard the moving body. Easter and Passover are alike in their repetition of sacrifice. Ramadan ends on the new moon. Our links with the past and our reassurance of our future require such ceremonies. The same thing repeated forever is a litany. Litany, words that mean something sacred. But we know only that is only through a leap of faith because the linguistic sign is arbitrary. Rhetoric is all. The aircraft towing an advertisement across the sky, dollar signs in the middle of the desert, dirty money, the beginning of Howard Hughes' obsessive-compulsive disorder, obsession with cleanliness, withdrawal from the world, retreat, ever-washing, cleansing. When we bathe together, it is holy. Baptism, dirty money, shame, guilt. Jesus wept. We are talking religion here. When we speak together, it becomes a chant, plain song, dollar signs in the middle of the desert, ka-ching. You can't take it with you. You will hang for this. Not that the experience is circular, cyclical, but the quality. The circles in Dante's Divine Comedy, the inverted theories of capitalism expounded by Milo Minderbender, the Dick Cheney character in Catch-22, the white soldier in Catch-22 bandaged from head to foot with an intravenous drip feeding into his arm and another tube catching him. When the liquid has drained through him, the two were swapped. Catch-22 itself. From the earliest tapes I did, coming from a certain sense from some of Andy Warhol's films, they just go on and you watch them or you cannot watch them. Maybe one's showing already and you come in and watch for a while and you can leave and come back and 8 hours later it's still going on. I like that idea very much. It also came from some of the music that I was interested in at the time, the early Phil Glass pieces and Lamont Young, whose idea was that music was something that was there. I like that very much, that kind of way of structuring time. Oh, part of it is not just an interest in the content, the image, but the way of filling a space and taking up time. Nauman, like Warhol before him, brings bad news for American dreamers. Filling a space and taking up time, starting where things generally end in definition, is surely putting Descartes before the horse. Art jokes are bad because they come retold by the likes of Freud or Duchamp, all old Europeans. They never dreamt the American dream. Architecture and sculpture are within America's domain post-war. And looking west, that's a lot of new space to fill, but with what and for whom? Sculpture was released from its pedestal into the wide world of buildings, street signs, walk, don't walk, the general public. Painting still requires connoisseurship because it needs a roof over its head and the concomitant values associated with a bourgeois collector. Alone in an old shop front in San Francisco, Nauman junked the painting and self-consciously followed his every move. The first post-war artist, first existential artist alone in a studio. Everything connects and everything alienates. Nothing connects and nothing alienates. All that we see is both particle and wave. Supple as seals in water, but the land is a different matter. Matter meets gravity, which is insistent and difficult, like a page full of German nouns. I can't go on, I will go on. Present the work, no more, no less. Film is famously the technology of representation, but these are not representations, they are records, moulds, pathways, corridors, digital information, sound, most closely associated with philosophical insight into the mutual and paradoxical constitution of time and the self. The self in time, past, present, and future, in memory, attention, and expectation. Video is sheer information, pure enumeration. Even its snowy nowhere is called static. Sometimes duration is nothing more than the wind through the trees. Plaster casts are made to objectify and interrogate their host body. The kernel removed, they insinuate that we are hollow, of unshapely pipes and cavernous depressions, with unlikely peaks and troughs. When something man-made, a chair, is dared into existence, let's see how it relates to everything else. Where to start? Everything cracks and shakes. The air trembles with similes. No one word's better than another. The earth moans with metaphors. In some languages, the question mark comes at the beginning of the sentence, which seems sensible because we are prepared for the right inflection. It's as if a primer in grammar thoroughly interrogated the efficacy of language, testing it to breaking point. Ethical or philosophical questions raised are a byproduct. We may think we know them by name, but let's see what they actually do. Figures which change the typical meaning of a word or words. Figures which move the letters or syllables of a word from their typical places. Figures which omit something, for example, a word, words, phrases, or clause from a sentence. Figures which repeat one or more words. Figures which repeat a phrase, a clause, or an idea. Figures which alter the ordinary order of words or sentences. A miscellaneous group of figures which deal with emotional appeals and techniques of arguing. In audio-visual underground chamber, with the figure in the ground, figuratively speaking, the camera and the microphone become our proxy consciousness. The underground chamber is the space inside our heads. It represents the complete decapitation of mind from body. The Queen had only one way of settling all difficulties, great or small. Off with his head, she said, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Having sacrificed it to power, the slave and the conscript, then to industrialization, the blue-collar worker, the subject is now separated from his body. Good boy, bad boy. Good dog, bad dog. Good God, bad God. Consider the duration of the works. When you wait for so long at a stop sign you think it's stuck, then it changes and you forgot your frustration long enough that eventually it is only the horn of the guy behind that interrupts your reverie. What's your hurry? Consider the attention that is given to the work. Time, the fourth dimension, is implicit in the sculptures, where the viewer is manipulated through corridors, around hoops, inside cages, before disappearing off screen. I mistrust audience participation. That's why I try to make these works as limiting as possible. Objects in a museum wait in the dark all night. They don't need to be switched on. Video is always on somewhere. You don't need a projectionist or any special premises, let alone a gallery. The tape recorder set inside a concrete block. The buried chamber and its watcher. My mind is the key that sets me free. Whatever we fear, Houdini knew about it. There is only one reality, at least, which we all seize from within, by intuition and not by simple analysis. It is our personality, and it's flowing through time, our self which endures. Bergson's idea of duration, like De Selby's disembodied travel plans, a trip from Bath to Folkestone by means of an exhaustive series of successive photographic images. A philosophy of the absurd, the footnotes of a thinker who never existed in a book about eternity narrated by a dead man. I'm talking the third policeman here, not the Old Testament. It will be absolutely impossible to represent duration conceptually because we will be talking about the memory of duration, not the actual experience of duration. Intellect is the mould in which the richness, joy and creativity of life is jellied into an inert, motionless and static dead matter. It would be absolutely impossible to represent duration conceptually. No, sorry, I'm repeating myself. Negative space for me is thinking about the underside and the backside of things. In casting, I always like the parting lines and the seams, things that help to locate the structure of an object. But in the finished sculpture, usually gets removed. These things help to determine the scale of the work and the weight of the material. Both what's inside and what's outside determining our physical, physiological and psychological responses, how we look at an object. When looking at a static object, the phenomenon of time or how we perceive something can be separated from the what we are looking at, which does not change. Negative space as against what? Positive space? The obverse of free will, the artist is faced with existential crisis. To make or not to make, that is the question. Which bits of the world's negative space am I about to fill? The underneath of the chair, hotel chair, any old chair in a room you landed in. When sat on, what is the least considered region in the entire universe? Perfect. Abstract thoughts being lobbed back and forth in a setting that is metaphorical as it is mundanely commonplace. Abstract and concrete, elusive, reductive, particular, and exemplary. It sets banality and originality on equal terms because one cannot exist without the other. Insomnia is a waking nightmare. Now one doesn't blink. It is a long, hard stare. It affords no distance between desire, need, remedy, ill, conscious, unconscious. It is the whole animal. Nothing transcends the limits of language. The only casts are just so, casts. They fill the space, not the chair or an animal or head. The head casts are too full of their own matter to have any trace of voodoo. It is dead air, like in the video. Darkness is dead light. Neon is the night, advertising its dark side. It is a word announcing itself, neither verb nor noun, action or object. Our goal, like the burning bush, is unconsumed by its own desire. Lust is endless. Neon is the sign. The loop, the insomniac loop, like Guston's painter, rigid in bed, ever open eyeball. The loop is where all this work, however ephemeral or concrete, it is relentless as a jukebox full of country music, or as abrupt as a punchline. Around the corner piece, 1970, red rum, red rum, red rum, red rum, red rum. Round and round the corridors, a child's view of a dream or nightmare, the locked doors of empty rooms. The child's intuitive grasp of something momentous, something happening at or just beyond the limits of its child mind behind locked doors. The little figures in the head in the Beano cartoon were a way of compartmentalising the conscious mind and the dream work. Running the film backwards is a waste of precious time. The work plays powerfully with play and playfully and playfulness. It finds the interstices, the synapses, the current leaping across the gap. It knows that values, meanings, weight and scale exist in relation to their opposites. Thesis and antithesis, love and death, the skull in the nativity scene. Hangman is a game for children, a race to meaning with the ultimate jeopardy and shame we discover in the post-asphyxiation erection. Executed by the state and exposed to the public. Sit down like a good boy, or sit down to die. An eye for an eye forever. Violent Incident, 1986. The logic of comedy is murderous. These are cruel toys, cruel stories we are used to. We fear the end, but at least it is the end. There is space for a story in Tom and Jerry, but imagine a future unfolding in endless repetition, everything exactly as predicted. Itchy and scratchy, the one in the other, forever and ever. It is America staring down its other and finding what itself lacks. A poke in the eye with your own trigger finger. Abroad in the world is no place for a cowboy, a toy with a toy gun, the boy with the mutant toys next door. That is the imagination of Bosch. Make use of old Europe and learn the more creative elements of torture and their names. Rendering. That's me in the corner, losing my religion. The fall is godless and graceless. Gravity comes with an implacable formula. The momentum of falling bodies can be expressed as a number. At a given location on the Earth and in the absence of air resistance, all objects fall with the same uniform acceleration. This acceleration is called the acceleration due to gravity, and it is referred to commonly as g equals 9.8 meters per second. Gravity exerts its pull everywhere. For human beings who walk and crawl and dance, rest and sleep with grace and clumsiness, balance and blunder, characterize our meetings with the ground. To deny gravity is to become disembodied, spectral, godlike, directing and starring, meddling with its powers like the silent masters, Chaplin and Beckett and Keaton, tramps and clowns whose stock figures that move us out of ourselves, the better to examine our behaviour, and the ground threatens to rise up at any moment. Buzz Lightyear to star command. This is the moment Buzz Lightyear realises he's not a superhero, he's just a toy. His existential moment as he flies, rather falls, is thrown through space. Heidegger says we are thrown into existence. That's not flying, that's falling with style. Wittgenstein characterised our compulsion to run against the boundaries of language. This running against the walls of our cage is perfectly, absolutely hopeless. What any discourse on ethics says does not add to our knowledge in any sense, but it is a document of a tendency of the human mind. Metaphors are like clowns running at you with buckets of confetti. The slap to the back of the head is some clown manoeuvring a plank. Have some dignity. Oh God, here comes the clown with a bucket again. Double steel cage piece. Just thinking about it is strangely liberating. Why is that? A cage within a cage is a double negative. Two wrongs don't make a right. Just as South American Triangle has the abuse of power implicit in the upturned chair and the historical memory of the triangular trade of slavery. These are the rules, but the rules are nonsense. It is a protection against our own irrational desires, but at its heart it is empty. It is protection against ourselves, but that protection is a useful fiction, a protection against the emptiness at the centre. By this double bluff, it reveals us to ourselves as hollow. Guantanamo Bay, there is nothing to fear but fear itself. We don't have answers, and we have the hostages to prove it. To walk inside it is to be in no man's land, a space for no one. It is the supreme work of nihilism. What we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence. Famous last lines. Shit and die, shit and live. What is truth? Asked Pontius Pilate. Human and divine, particle and wave. Thank you.